Grandma.
I call my grandmother Gia.
I call her Suki.
Grandma. Yeah, Grandma.
Grandma.
Nana. I think she thinks that like Granny is like kind of cute. Like I think that's her like Jenny from the Block like upgrade on Grandma.
So only my sister and I call my grandmother Gia.
It was like a Suki now, you know, so she's Suki to everybody.
Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I haven't really heard her talk much about her life and her experience. She instilled like mannerisms and being very poised and always putting your best foot forward.
Because my grandmother is really sure about who she is. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Grandmother Project presents Pearls and Pocketbooks, our live monthly interactive webinar experience featuring Black grandmothers and granddaughters discussing love, life, and everything in between. I'm Melanie Brezill, and I am the creator of the Grandmother Project, an original 9-episode docuseries and archive, which you just saw the trailer for, now available on YouTube. Simply go to youtube.com/The Grandmother Project and be sure to click like and subscribe. The link will be in the chat. So first of all, I really sincerely want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in month after month. As we near the end of season 2 of Pearls and Pocketbooks, I want you to know how much your support and engagement means to this labor of love. So thank you to everyone out there, especially our loyal fans, and welcome to everyone tuning in for the first time. So, as you know, last episode, we chatted with an aunt and niece duo, Glenda Starr Kelly and her niece, Cynthia Randolph, about riding the ways of life, trusting their instincts, and their journeys as grandmothers. Tonight, we are chatting with a woman who is not your everyday pie-making grandma. She's a granny/Gigi. She's a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, an artist, occupational therapist, a lifelong learner, and a member of Chicago's vibrant LGBTQ community. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of Pearls and Pocketbooks, episode 14, Identity. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to this evening's guest. Chicago born and bred, weaned on blues and jazz by a right-thinking mama and a daddy who tried. Middle child in a favorite clan, never able to follow others willingly, still charting her own course. Lifelong learner and still amazed at the wonder of the tiny humans who look like her. Always interested in what lies ahead and finding happiness along the way. It is an honor to introduce you to Ms. Donna Rose, Granny/Gigi Weems. Donna Rose, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yay, we did it. Melanie,
Welcome.
thank you. Thank you so much. That introduction was something. I feel like I'm really respectable now. So, but thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's just wonderful to be a part of this. Really, I think just a wonderful project, because who else better to tell our stories? So, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for joining me this evening. This is really cool, right?
It is.
So, this episode is all about identity, what it means to define yourself for yourself, and really how our identities grow as we evolve and grow. And so with that, take us back to the beginning. Tell us what it was like. You're from Chicago. What was it like for you growing up in your household in Chicago back in the day?
My mom was a very rare breed. She was an actual native Chicagoan. My dad is a transplant. He originally is from Kansas City, and they met at an enlisted men's event because my mother's uncle, our Uncle Al, he was in the Army, Dad was in the Coast Guard, but this was the enlisted men's party. So Daddy was super good looking, and so was Mama, and sparks flew, and next thing you know, they got married, right? And so my earliest memories were growing up on 47th. You hear so much about Bronzeville. And we lived next door in a courtyard building next to the Harvard School for Boys. Really, I mean, it's shuttered now, but I mean, it was really prestigious and all of that. But in our world, to me, it was like everything living on 47th Street. I remember being like, I don't know, 3 or 4, and I wanted to be a big girl so bad. And so my mom tied a little handkerchief with whatever, 27 cents, a quarter and 2 pennies. And I was able to go to the store by myself for a change because Miss Virginia at the AMP would come to the corner, watch me, and then sit me up on the little stand where the bags were while she got my mother's cigarettes, and then she would put them in a bag, and then I would walk back and my mother would pick me up there, and I just felt like, wow, I was grown. I was like, man, they can't tell me to do anything. So, I mean, for me, that was just, our environment was safe. My father would take my sister and I and walk up and down, the boulevard and that. And this memory, my mom was learning how to sew. So all of our clothes, we look, like twins, sort of. And so, we get the little 10-cent cups of ice cream with the wooden spoon and sit on the grass. And, my father was so proud to walk with his daughters. And we just were like excited because we had ice cream, So it was a wonderful, vibrant kind of community. Our aunts and uncles, our parents, they used to go to all of these formal affairs, the green donkeys, the blue tigers, and just, suit up in that. Now, mind you, there were 5 of us in a 3-room apartment on 47th and Ellis, and we all fit in there some kind of way. And I just remember, when they would come back, they're probably a little tipsy. And so our older cousin would babysit for us, right? Make sure we didn't burn the house down. And then they would let us get up, get a little piece of barbecue or some smoked fish. Those memories, I mean, just wonderful. I felt that our father was probably the president of the world, and my mother had to be, second in command because the sun rose and shone on them. And I remember, my mother reading Paul Laurence Dunbar to us, in dialectical poems, just being really, I mean, she instilled that desire to learn, to appreciate literature and the arts. I remember my father like deciding we're going to learn French, so he was bonjour. We're like, okay, there you go. So those were really wonderful. Unfortunately for us, our mother passed away when my mother was 10 years old. And so there was a bit of a gap there because a lot of our friends, they would see their grandparents. Mm-hmm. Now, our father's mother, we would visit her and we called her grandmother. She was very she was strict. Yeah, she was a little strict. And at any rate, my mother really made a big effort to instill in us the things. And her line, and it used to bother me as a child, she would say stuff like, I'm not going to be around always. You're going to have to learn how to do this. You're going to have to be a big girl. And I'm like, I'm 5. Okay, So, but when we think about it, because my mother really didn't share a lot about her growing up because it was hard. Her father was, reportedly an itinerant, Mexican person who was working probably at the stockyards or whatever, because there was work. There was never enough money. And before, after her mother, my grandmother, passed away, and this was so ironic because she was a healer, a root woman, but she couldn't heal herself. Right. So back then they were talking about locked bowels, probably some kind of obstruction or whatever, maybe colon cancer. We don't know exactly. But at any rate, they would receive payment in fruit and goods. Right. Wow. And so anyway, when Rosetta Bowen, which is where the rose comes from in my name, when when she passed away, her mother came up from Kentucky to collect them from what was then it was a boarding school, Betsy Ross. And so for, poor children. And so she came up here from Kentucky, older person, and got my mother and my uncle out of there. Now, it was a hard scrabble existence, but I mean, you learn how to do. And so, when you live in a boarding school or something like that, being neat, because I used to wonder, how come we have to be, we thought they were just cruel. We get up, we're always scrubbing. Everything had to be clean. Everything had to be in order. But what happened when you're living in that kind of communal dormitory thing, you have to be able to keep up with your stuff or else it'll be missing, right? So my mom was on top of that. It's going to be neat. We may not have had a lot of money, but I tell you one thing, we were buffed up from, the head to the toe. I mean, you were going to be shining, clean. Everything about you was going to be gleaming because that's what they,
Right.
that's what they instilled
right.
in us. Yeah.
What a legacy. I mean,
Oof.
and it's just, I really love hearing that because when you talk about, your mother's generation and the generation before, the word strength comes to mind. I mean, what these individuals must have seen and experienced. And somehow, so many of them were able to turn those experiences into something positive and to provide
Absolutely.
just this beautiful existence and childhood for their children, And I think that
Absolutely.
that is just really powerful. And it's really awesome that that's what you come from. That's what you're made of.
But here's the thing that's, when we look at it, I mean, now we're talking about class and all these, we didn't know anything about that. We didn't even know we were poor. We were just getting up, doing our thing every day. But the difference between my mother's family, now they had cafes, they ran juke joint, they ran liquor, they ran policy, they had card games. You had to buy in because the house wins all the time. And so their thing was like, we're not working for white folks. That was their legacy. My mother was, even though she was a very fair-skinned Black woman, she was race holding and made no bones about it. And everybody in her family was pretty much the same way. Whereas my father's family, they were actually, like the social climbers, kind of a little bougie because they had a little land and, still not a whole lot of money, but they had a lot of land. And so, being able to turn those things around and, in retrospect, like they were probably better off because they were able to, grow food, coming up, never a lot of money, but they always had their needs met. And they had, my grandfather and grandmother. Grandfather was actually a lot more fun. Grandmother, I heard was fun when she was younger, but by the time we came along, and I think some of those things had to do with the fact that my mother's family was poor. They were always looking, to marry up, marry well. And so even though my mother was light, now that was also desired, but
Right.
she didn't have that. But again, my mom was, well, for me, I always felt like she brought the fun and the light in the household. Daddy was all about the work, taskmaster. There were at least 9 million rules in the book, and man, woe to you if you broke one of those rules, because the retribution was swift. Mama, you could kind of finesse a little bit. I remember one time, I don't know what I had done, and I don't know what got into my head by this time we moved up from 47th and Ellis to a 8-room apartment on 58th Street, which was huge. I mean, we thought it was like a mansion. It was just huge. My sister and I always shared a room, but like my brother had his own room. We had a playroom. Who had a playroom? So, but again, she was, very active politically. She was always on top of that. But that was also the era where men didn't want the wife working. And my mother was like, why not? I mean, we need stuff. Let's get stuff. So anyway, it was that kind of stuff. But yeah, our grandmother I remember one time she came to visit us. We would go to Kansas. And I do appreciate what she wanted to do. She wanted to make sure that all of us first cousins got to know each other. And it was, yes, it was very wise on her part, because that's why we're all still tight to this day. And so, our concern is to make sure that the younger ones also have that same commitment to family that we have all experienced. I mean, it's nothing like everybody being on that big front porch and everybody got to get the same whipping. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah, I didn't do it. Oh, nobody did it. We're going to find out who did it,
That's right.
So, I mean, but having that kind of legacy. But the thing about it, I remember when she came to our house, and that's when I remember thinking, that's not a nice grandmother, because she kind of said we lived in boxes. Now, true enough, they had a house and little land, nice garden and everything behind their house, but our place was pretty magnificent, I might add. I mean, we had big wooden pocket doors, a formal sitting room with a marble fireplace. Wasn't working, but I mean, the place was beautiful. And it was bigger than what we had been living in before. And so to hear her say that, and I was always that middle child, like always watching, listening, and I'm like,
perceiving.
Yes, and you can't talk about my mother. You can't talk about my mother. And so I just remember thinking, I don't know if I like her as much. I mean, they used to send $10, in the Christmas envelope, and then, that was fine, but it was like, you just can't talk about my mom. So I think that there were some other kind of perceptions that were going on at the time, but I have to give her, all due respect, because I do understand, because they too came up in a very hard time. My grandmother was okay. And I hope my siblings, if they're on, they don't mind me saying this one. But so anyway, you know how youthful, you're experimenting with sex. You got your little boyfriend, little girlfriend or whatever. And so this my father and one of his sisters, one of his sisters who was older or whatever. So she had a boyfriend, daddy had a girlfriend all the time. Daddy good looking, green eyes, deep voice, big, strong. So good looks come in the family. So they're out in the barn. So I guess they didn't let the younger sister, our Aunt Thelma Jean. So she goes to tattle to grandmother, and our cousin Lil was in there. So cousin Lil was, she like a little tip. So anyway, she goes running in there and she's like telling, and she's like, they're in the barn and they're funking. So, so cousin Lil's cracking up and she's having another drink. She said, what were they doing, baby? They're funking. Man, my grandmother went out there to this barn, honey, tied nooses around their necks, made them stand up on a damn bale of hay, talking about this is what's going to happen if we're going to do all this funking. Now, how traumatic is that?
Wow.
Yes.
This was back in the day, and that's, it's these memories, it's so interesting to think about all the things that sort of make up our family tapestry.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because all of these things, they sort of make us who we are.
Exactly.
And just it's just I could listen to you forever, because it's just so colorful. You know what I mean? And it makes so much sense in terms of all of the work that you ended up doing. So you mentioned that your mom had this political spirit and was really engaged in the world around her. And so we've got a picture. We're going to try to get up a picture of you. So this is you as a teen. Okay. And so I kind of want to know, because this is around the age, I believe in what you said in some of our earlier talks, that you sort of found your political voice. And so tell us about this teenager right here. How old were you, and what were you sort of finding at this age?
Oh my gosh, I was about 14, 15, and I really had an attitude about having a perm. I wanted to wear a natural. And oh my gosh, that started a whole bunch of mess at the house. And I went to an all Catholic girls' high school because my parents, at that time, the logic was, well, if you can't be Irish, be Catholic, you'll get a good education, right?
Yeah. Right.
Except this was, it was like 90% white or whatever. And so, we kind of got recruited from our Catholic grammar school because some of our friends' older sisters went there. So, they made it sound wonderful. Well, it wasn't so wonderful because in like this is what a couple of years after Martin Luther King being assassinated in '68. So, I'm going to and we were like the third Black family on the block, and in the house that I'm in right now, we were the third Black family. So I'd have to take this suburban bus, and no one was going that way. Everybody was going down the street to Calumet, like Shaka Khan and all those folks. So I'm running to this suburban bus, and while it passes through this kind of borderline, more Black folk, then it goes really white, and then it stops in front of my Catholic high school. Well, when it was time for me to leave class in the afternoon, there would be like gangs of white girls chasing, and at one time there were two of us, but sometimes we didn't get out of class at the same time, so they would be 20 girls chasing one Black girl. And I got tired of it. I mean, and so yes, I was resentful. I was angry, and parents are like, "Oh yeah, my daughter goes to Longwood," and that's all great and everything, but they didn't understand what we were dealing with.
Mm.
And because we came from a pretty much all Black environment to something truly foreign. I mean, and we didn't go to all Catholic school. I mean, we had a time public school, Black schools, for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, maybe. And those Black teachers were invested in you. When
Right.
the teacher would come to your house, it was a big deal. You put out your Sunday, Easter dishes, special holiday dishes, And so to then go to this environment, kids have a sense of justice. It's innate. When you see a little toddler saying no, they know something is not fair. So now here I am, a young teen, and I'm seeing this, and I'm listening to all these stories that they're saying in the classroom about Jesus. And I don't have anything against Jesus or Christianity. It did prepare me for Buddhism, but I wrote a paper about the unfairness of Christianity, and oh my gosh, I got they sent a note home to my parents, and I got a dressing down, and some of my books got taken, and that's what really awakened me, because we saw what happened in '68 when Martin Luther King. I mean, we saw our neighborhoods invaded by National Guardsmen, people rappelling up buildings, with rifles. It was horrible. We went to my best friend and I, we went to Washington Park to hear Don Lee, now Haki Madhubuti, read poetry. And there were all of these Jeeps with all of these, battering. It was crazy. We probably had no business being over there, but we just didn't have a sense until we saw all of that. It was frightening. And so then to go to school with the folks that I just saw, battering down doors and searching for snipers outside our front room window, and my mother was, oh man, she was ticked off to no end. And so being in that environment, I remember one of the nuns she made some inane comment. I forget who it was, Martin DePorres, all the colored girls come up to the front. So, yeah. And so we were like, what, did she just call us out? What the, So yeah, I was not a happy camper. It was not a comfortable environment for me at all. However, I did meet some good friends after the fact, but it was like every day, well, we formed a Black student group called the Black Young Ladies of Longwood, right? And because we felt like no one called us young ladies, but we wanted to let it be known that we are Black students here. And of course, I was all up in that knee deep, matter of fact, we had this is one of the ways I got uninvited to return to the school, because a group of us, our brothers that were going to other Catholic schools, we were like, we're going to have this protest outside of Longwood because they were unfair. Man, so it's like, I don't know, 150, 200 Black people, and half of them were boys, and Black boys. Oh my God, of course something was, yeah. So this is what really sparked my interest. And I ended up joining the Black Panther Party at a very early age. I was like 16, I was 15 going on 16. And they were fine with it, because actually when I look back in retrospect, we were all young people. The older ones were like 21, 22. That was like, the grown folks. we had no idea for that. And so that was the beginning. And actually my mother was okay with that. She didn't have an issue with it. My father, I used to think he just didn't like it. I always thought he was a little bit on the accommodationist tip. But I think daddy was more concerned about safety, those kinds of things.
Right.
So that's what was happening, why I was looking so sullen. And that was my look going to Academy of Our Lady.
I think it's fantastic that, that's when a lot of activists sort of find their voices. You're coming of age and you're finding it. But what I really think is remarkable is your mom's support. I have a photo of you as a young adult. Yes, look at that fro, y'all.
Yeah.
So
And look at my mom's look. That's where I got it from.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, this 72 was the year I graduated. This was before graduation. As you can see, there's a Christmas tree in the back. So, I had finally managed to, kind of navigate through the waters and, but by the same token, I ended up graduating from an entirely different Catholic girls' school. My sister and I both. My sister's 2 years younger than me. And so I didn't really tell my parents I was uninvited back to Longwood. I just said, hey, it'll be cheaper if we go to visitation, and then Dolores and I can take the bus together and boo, 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 boo. Because my sister had to come up and rescue me once at Academy of Our Lady. We never told my mother that either. But so we ended up going to a seriously progressive Catholic girls' school. I mean, it was a hotbed of political progression. I mean, so at this place, whereas I wasn't doing so well at Academy of Our Lady, I kind of flourished, even though I got in trouble big time there too. But I got an A on a protest. I came up with some guerrilla warfare kind of protest, and we were protesting the Vietnam War. My teacher loved it, got an A+. I'm like, okay, this is the school for me. George McGovern was running for president. That was one of the first. In 72, 18-year-olds were granted the right to vote. I haven't missed an election day since. And so that's the kind of environment. I became a little bit disenchanted with the Black Panther Party for Defense around this time also, because even though I think politically it was far more progressive and ahead of the curve than most other organizations at that time. They were talking about, homosexuals were our revolutionary comrades. No one ever said that, right? And so whereas Huey P. Newton definitely made that a part of the platform, how that translated into some of the other local organizations was different. And in Chicago, we were no different than most. Our chairman, Fred Hampton, he was actually very political and very progressive in that way, but some of the other folks were not. And so I remember we went to a party, and it was up in the projects that are now gone, but it was all the party members, and it was cool, it was like, yeah, back then everybody had a little something, whatever. But what we were, my friend and I, who went to the same high school as I did, we were like, well, what's going on in this back room? We thought they were smoking some pot or whatever. Honey, they were doing some other kind of stuff. And that's when we're like, whoa, wait a minute. Right. I didn't sign up for none of that, because it was, I don't know, a group grope of some sort. And so I remember, and I don't even want to name this individual because he's changed too, but they were talking about, well, if you don't want to be counter-revolutionary, so if you're not going to have sex with members of the party, you counter-revolutionary. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm about to be counter-revolutionary. Right. It just wasn't fitting for me. Yeah, but by the same token, I did I think in my group, I was like one of the last girls to, lose her virginity, and all that. And to me, it wasn't anything to write home about, it really was. I didn't understand all of that, and then for 2 seconds, and then you're sweaty and stinking. I was like, I know some girls rhapsodized about it. I just wasn't one. And so this was also around the time, I kind of came out really backwards, all the way backwards with everything. And so at that time, it was all about nation time. We got to make sure that our numbers are plentiful. And so my boyfriend, who I loved as much as I could at 17, 18 years old, we having all these philosophical discussions, and he's like, well, but we're both out of high school, and and we can do this, and woo woo woo. And he made a good argument at the time. Low Spark of High Heel Boys is the song I remember making my son to. Where every time I hear it, I think of that. But that wasn't going to be my path. It wasn't going to be my path. And so I remember I shared with my sister, and she was like, well, I don't care. That's, whatever. So my brother, yeah, the vote was out with him. But I mean, I think he was so busy going through his stuff, that really wasn't a big deal. But when I told my mom, I just remember being so nervous, because I know how she took it, when I was pregnant. Oh my gosh, being pregnant, not married, that was not cool.
How old were you when you became a mom?
I was 18. I had a scholarship at the old University of Illinois at Circle or UIC, yeah, at Circle, and I went until I couldn't fit behind, and that's what I think they were most upset about. But and then so I'm like, well, hell, if I'm just breaking all kind of rules, I might as well tell mom about this next one, because I mean, let's get it over. If they're going to disown me, I might as well know why. And my mother just sat me down, and this was a time of turmoil in our family. I mean, my mother and father were having a lot of marital issues. They were divorcing. It was not pleasant in our house. We had a lot of upheaval amongst our siblings. So this was a very tumultuous time. Mm-hmm. And, but I just remember my mom had her own apartment, and I went over there and said, I'm just going to tell her, So she said, honey, she looked at me and she says, baby, I saw you before you saw yourself. And she said, whatever's going to make you happy. I don't understand why you like your own gender, because I can't stand, but if you like, okay. I'm sorry. Is that okay to say I did?
Well, it's, you know what? It's a family show, but we don't have any kids on here.
Okay.
Be yourself.
Okay. Well, that was me for sure. But I just remember feeling like so relieved. I'm up here thinking that thunderbolts were going to come down. I was going to hell and all of this, and none of that. Even my father, he wasn't really, I used to think he just didn't like it. But after having some conversations with him as an adult, he told me a story of a young woman that he had met while he was in the Coast Guard. And Lupe and he were good friends. And so I guess she was his beard and he was hers. So they would go out and, drink with their enlisted comrades and whatever. But because what happened to her, some of the other men found out about it, and they beat and brutalized this woman in the service. These were other servicemen who did this to her. And my father was really hurt, because he said, if I had been there with her, that wouldn't have happened, because my father was no joke. But that's what his worry was for me. He says, and you got this baby, how is that going to, no, so here I was thinking he was just upset with me. He was worried for me and my son. Right. That's really what the deal was.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a blessing to have a family, because, this is an issue that you're hearing about even now in society. People are afraid to be ostracized or, rejected from their own family. And so, and we're talking about a time, you're talking about the 70s, you're talking about a time where we didn't have, representation on television, legislation. Exactly. I mean, these things are still going on, right?
Absolutely.
And so people are still fighting for rights. And so with that, now you are this mom, you have come out, I mean, doing so many brave things at an early age, How did you navigate parenting? How did you find sort of community and the support to do that in this time frame that you were doing it?
That I really like that question, because of course there is no rule book, handout. You get none of that, when your child is born. So you navigate it. My mother used to always say, you know what to do. When it's time to do it, you will know what to do. And I never felt that that was true. But what happened for me, of course, I was resentful. I was angry. I felt like my life had been curtailed. And then there's this little tiny person that needed me every day. Damn what I'm going through. I need this. Matter of fact, I got to have it right now. And so, but what happened as we're kind of navigating life, I remember one aunt and one cousin, they came over to the house and they're like, well, we'll take Mookie, and I'm looking at them like, hell no, y'all not, I see what y'all do. No, I think he better off with me. I'll take my chances. But what happened when he was about 4 or 5, I don't know. The only way I can describe it is I fell in love with my son. I figured out, now I got it. I understood why, my father got up every daggone day. Daddy never took a sick day. My mom was on point every day. She cooked all of those things. Taught my sister and I how to play games, life of the party, also telling us how to, what we shouldn't do anyway. I wish they had told us more about what we should do. But I mean, that's why I kind of raised my boy a little bit differently. But, just learning that, I mean, and to be honest, I was a very hard parent because I was afraid, to be honest with you. I didn't want, I said I wasn't going to cry. My kinfolk are going to laugh because they know how I am. But I just didn't want him to suffer. And I felt like he's got the one thing that I can't give him, because his father died very early on, just a horrible situation. And, I was like, damn it, I had a father, he's not going to have. It didn't work out like that. But so what happened, I ended up kind of navigating and finding my way, and ran into a group of other lesbians who were also moms. And so what we ended up doing, and matter of fact, there was also a gay brother. He had 2 sons. He had a difficult situation with his ex-wife. So he was raising his boys. And so I remember Jerry would call me. He's like, girl, you're going to have to take these 2 because I'm about to hurt somebody. And I just remember, so it was nice because it gave my son an opportunity to see there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. This is how we live. And that's just all to it. And so so being around this group of really supportive women, and I was still doing my activism. I came out on Oprah Winfrey's show when she first went syndicated. That's how my grandparents found out.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
I didn't quite think we were regulars, because there were few of us who were willing to be out. But then, as my son got older, I remember he was late coming home and he knew I didn't play that. And I was like, what's okay? He came falling up in the house and I was like, what's going on? Because I'm about to step off into you, what's up? He said, Mom, he said, next time you go on TV, he said, you need to let me know. He said, because I had to have a fight. And it changed all about how I thought about that. And I told him, I said, you know what, you don't ever have to fight for me. I fight for you. But it made me more sensitive to what he was experiencing, right? And so I remember, and he was Mr. Social, only child. So he's social. He knows everybody. Everybody knows him. He's tall. He's good looking, smart, vivacious, effervescent, all of these wonderful things. And so he ended up kind of dealing with his friends in a certain way. Because, I mean, I wasn't real big on him going to stay with other people. He had one experience as a little guy. And I really liked the kid, Mike, and I forget his brother's name. But anyway, so my son was asking to spend the night. So I had to let him, because I said, if I don't, he's going to just be. So I knew what was going to happen, and it did. So he went, James, that was the boy's name. He went over there, spent the night, and he called me so early, and I'm thinking something's wrong. I'm like, let me get over here right away, quick. And I said, you okay? So we have our little talk. I'm like, anybody touch you? He said, no, ma. He said, but when the light turned on, he said he saw a bunch of roads. I was like, wow. So never asked for that again. That was the end of that. He was done with that. So, but I mean, but even his friends, you know, as he got to be an older teenager, he was like captain of the basketball team and stuff like that. And these kids came by our house because I felt like this. I know what's going on up in our crib. I don't know what's going on in theirs.
Right.
And so, and I used to ask him, I was like, well, Mookie, I mean, how did you deal with that? And he's like, he said, look, if they were going to be uncool, they wasn't going to be my friend. That's just all to it, mama.
That's right.
And so all of his boys, they knew what time of day it was. I never had to say nothing. Matter of fact, one of his friends stayed with us for a little bit. His mom was, you know, she was kind of out there a little bit. And I don't know, Malcolm always thought we had the best of whatever, you know, but
Yeah.
he stayed with us till, you know, things kind of calmed down at his house. And, you know, just that kind of compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah, for each other. And then we would see that. So we would all do our holidays, you know, you do your family thing, but then it was like, okay, I'm through with all the straight stuff. I got to go see my girls. And that's how we used to survive, you know, because it's
Yeah.
like we gonna do our family obligations, of course, you know, but then we want to do our thing too, you know. So
Right.
all of us, you know, and matter of fact, their kids all grew up with my son. And so they all have their little clutch, you know.
Right. And so
So
it just sounds like so much community. And I think that what I'm hearing too, that is really um, inspiring, I think, and I'm sure people feel that way, is about you setting the tone for how you're going to, what your family is going to be.
mhm,
And family is who you define it to be, and how, but the thing that I hear is love. You know, that's the foundation.
right.
And the community that you built, you know, that's truly powerful, and that's what children need. You know, we do have some pictures that I want to get up because I mean,
Okay.
this conversation is just so great. We're going to show you, this is your
Oh,
mom. And
yes.
you said your mom was, you know, just so supportive of you. And I think that that is just so, I mean, that's what kids, again, that's what kids are looking for. And so I think that that's really powerful that, again, even at a time when we didn't have the representation
That's
and
right.
things like that, you know, that your family, you know, has been progressive. And I think that's really beautiful. And then we have, you can tell us about this organization. So you were talking about how you had your people where
Yes.
you sort of felt, you know, like you could express yourself. So tell us sort of about this time. Tell us about,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
what was it like being a Black queer mom in Chicago back in the day? You know, what were the organizations like?
Well, for our particular group, Mountain Moving Coffee House, I typically would usually be the only mom, you know, because it wasn't popular. Like now, everybody's a mom, you know. But back then, you know, and particularly since I had a man child, you know, like, you know, so I mean, there was a bit of pushback. And again, that's why we formed our own groups. And I was also, you know, doing a lot of this performance stuff. So our lesbian of color collective, and all of us basically had kids. So this is why we created our own. Matter of fact, we actually put some flavor and spice up into the Mountain Movie Coffee House. Like these women that you see here to the extreme right, Lola Lijong, one of my dear friends, and her son has actually come help me. Now they're men, you know, come to help me do some repair on the house. Carmen Abrego up over her shoulder. I mean, you know, well, she doesn't have children, but she had like 9,000 nieces and nephews. I mean, she's one of a family of 10 kids. And so anyway, yeah, it's just we created a space for ourselves. And we were able to, you know, not only put our voices, matter of fact, because when I was doing performance, when my son got old enough, I'd have him work the door. My mother came to almost every performance I ever had, although one did shock her. Um, uh, this guy, Jeff Abel, a performance artist, he was always pretty wild, but they did some kind of pubic hair sculpture thing. My mother was like, baby, you didn't tell me about that. I said, Mama, I didn't know they were doing all that. You know, that was something way different. But my mother came to all of these events. We always had these big Kwanzaa celebrations, huge. You know, my mom would be front and center, and we'd have all of our friends. And I've always been that conduit. So I'd have connections with this group of people, you know, Black folks, Latinx, you know, Puerto Rican, you know, trans. Well, you know, back then we call them drag queens or whatever. And so I knew all these different people from all over the place. And so where would they meet? With me. And so it expanded that, it just expanded our circle in so many ways. And like, I have to say, even with a lot of the organizations here, I mean, I was there when they either got born, formed, or whatever. And so yeah, I'm like one of the repositories for the dirt, you know. So we have, you know, the party line about organization, then we have the dirt. I got the dirt. So, but again, you know, it's just really wonderful to see that now, you know, people like my son or my sister, they're allies. You know, I'm not worried about, you know, they're not going to be the ones that are going to do bashing or things like that. They're our allies because what they stand for is justice and what's good. You know, and I'm not saying that, you know, we're up on a pedestal, but I will say, as my father would say all the time, you could do worse than a Weems any day of the week. You know, I mean, because we're not the ones that are going to hurt you. You know, we're trying to keep things on a elevated to some degree.
That's right.
So, you know, this is what we're all about. I want the same thing every parent has ever wanted. You want peace, you want prosperity, you know, you want safety, you want protection, but most importantly, you want your children to be happy. This is what we want. We know you're going to take the bitter with the sweet. That's a given. But what do we really want? We want happiness. You know, that's the legacy. I want them to know what it is to work. And I don't mean just going to labor, but to make the effort, you know, to get what you want. My son would tell me, he said, Mom, if you were a man, you'd have been a millionaire 10 times by now. So he understands, you know what I'm saying? He understands these dynamics. You know, my great nephew, another strong ally in his own way, you know, and he's that quiet fire, you know, but again, that's not going to be the brother who's going to be out here bashing folks. You know what I mean? You know, my niece, she's fierce in her own right, you know, so I mean, my brother, my gosh, you know, anyway, all of our family, you know, we all have these wonderful, wonderful qualities. And I really, I just really want to make sure that that kind of legacy is the thing that's going to be communicated, you know, and whatever the passion is, you know, whatever that thing is that you want to do, I say you do it. We'll help you, you know, that, and that's just it. We stand behind you. We support you. We love you. You're part of us. You know, my grandboy, my first grandboy, I mean, he got himself in a little jam there, but you know, okay, you're not the first person to screw something up. Trust me, I'm the queen of that, you know, but also, you know, to be able to have a second chance, who's going to give that to us? My brother-in-law talks about that a lot. And I really, you know, my sister is really fortunate. I mean, she really has a good guy, and you know, that those things really stick with us. You know, it's like in this place called family, you know, we're welcome. You're welcome. You're a family. You're welcome here.
You are welcome here. And I think that is, you really kind of hit on some questions I was going to ask you about, because this is part of your identity, right? And
Yes.
You are a family member, you're a grandmother, you're a great grandmother. I do want to show some of those pictures, but you've sort of touched on something very big, something that I think we all can grasp onto, which is family is a place where you are welcome here.
The little one on my lap, that's grandboy number 2.
Ah, okay.
And so those little characters around grandboy number 2, those are his aunt and uncle, and those are my 2 great grands.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
You talked about how, you know, family and what your family represents, and how you all have the motto, if you will, that you're welcome here. What excites you about this current generation of young people? What excites you about them?
They are smart as whips. They are smart and keen in ways that I never was, you know, and I'm really grateful for the ones, I mean, and actually, I mean, for me being a late, you know, later going to school, you know, I was always the oldest one in the class. And so I would always like, who's the smart one over here? Let me get over here and see what they're talking about. And then what would happen though, because I would be getting the grades, because I'm not playing. I ain't got time to play because I'm paying for this. My mom and dad didn't pay for none of this. And so they were like, well, wait a minute, Miss Donna, wait a minute, how'd you get that? I was like, well, let me show you what I did, you know? So, I mean, yeah, they're going to take us to the next level. And I love when I hear kids say, you know, we're not our ancestors. That's not happening here. And I like that. And I can get behind that. So to me, my job is to support that. Always, like if you need to know, I mean, because I don't think we have to continually look back, but we need to know what has happened in the past so it can inform what we're doing in the future. So I'm that receptacle for that kind of information. So we don't have to keep doing, the wheel over and over and over. We got that. Now we're going to take this thing and we're going to do some other kind of propulsion going forward. So I am really excited about the smart young people. Woo!
Right. And that's it. I think that is such a good attitude. And we need elders like yourself. We need people like you, just younger people, the younger generation.
Yeah.
Everybody is necessary. And I also I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about the allies in your family. It is important for, I try to be a vocal, strong ally within my family, but it's important for allies within families to be
Yes.
vocal.
Yes.
And to make sure that that our families do remain places where everyone can feel welcome. To that end, we do have a question. So this is live, and we got, as we are beginning to wrap up, one of our viewers wants to know, what advice would you give to a young woman who wants to come out to her religious and conservative family?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. It is what it is. And I think everyone is entitled to their reaction. So you have to allow them to have their reaction. I mean, it's sort of like, because if you withhold it, then you rob them of the opportunity. So, I mean, your family better than I, so you pick a time where you feel comfortable. And if, folks are open, sit down and have that conversation. And trust the process, because even, I mean, and I've seen this many times where families are really just afraid more so I mean, if they're just out and out, like, we're going to kill you, because I've seen that too. But I mean, you want to allow them to have their reaction, and then what to do. You'll know how to respond accordingly. So trust the process, find your strength in yourself and move forward. Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Thank you for answering that question. And we've got two other comments.
Come on.
Someone said, Miss Donna has lived, honey. Yes.
And I ain't done either.
That's right. And I love that. And so with that, just two more questions as we wrap up.
Sure.
I love the fact that you said that, because you described yourself as a lifelong learner.
Mm-hmm.
So what is next? What is something on your bucket list? What are you looking forward to? What's sort of like next for you? Because, it doesn't stop, right?
Ever. Well, I mean, I really am looking now to really return to my creative life. I mean, I've worked on some screenplays. I've been part of the Black Lesbian Writers Room. I've got a couple of projects that I know one of my mentors is super excited to see it get funded. So, I mean, I want to continue to write, and, my voice has changed. I mean, when I started out, I did all this other, when you're young and sexy and all of that. And so, but now, the conversation's different. I mean, still sexy, still hot, but also nuanced and, more introspective, and also looking toward, where we are headed. So being able to share, those thoughts and project some of those images, I'm really excited about doing that, because the other thing that I found out is this technology, you can still do everything you want to do and perform, and they won't know if you gained 10 pounds or not. So there you go.
I love it. I love it. And so finally, one last question, and it's sort of a tie-in. You mentioned, and this is you just having a really cool adventure as an adult. This is a more recent photo.
Yes.
I love it. And so this is fantastic. I wanted to ask you, so, Oprah always asks this question to people. She has a whole book called by this title, which is, what is something that you know for sure?
That I am powerful, and there's power in vulnerability. I didn't realize that when I was younger. I think I was way more arrogant in that, but I'm learning to be gentle, not only with myself, but also with others. So that's pretty nifty. That's been a big lesson. Big lesson.
Wow. Thank you so much. Donna Rose Weems, you are amazing. Thank you so much. This has been just such an amazing conversation. I know everybody out there watching has felt the same. Thank you so much for being on Pearls and Pocketbooks. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Melanie. Thank you again.
So, I want to take this time to thank all of you all for tuning in month after month again. And I want to do a special thanks to Glenda Starr Kelly, Paris Nesbitt, Cassandra Brezill for your continued support. I also want to take this time to thank the amazing Zeke Hester, who has been our engineer extraordinaire this evening. Thank you for being amazing. Many of you have asked how you can help. So right now you can go to youtube.com/The Grandmother Project and click subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram @The Grandmother Project. And finally, if you would like to donate to help us continue to host these programs live on Zoom in this webinar format, please stay tuned for a very special message. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next month, and stay tuned for a special message. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Supporting the Grandmother Project is easy. Simply go to www.grandmotherprojectseries.com and click donate. You'll be directed to our PayPal page, where you can enter an amount to help support the creation of new episodes and content. Be sure to like and subscribe to our page on YouTube and follow us on social media. See you next month on the next Pearls and Pocketbooks.